the current controversy around Diane Abbott isn't actually something that's come out of her mouth for a change. It's actually about the remarks that have come from a Tory donor, a significant Tory donor's mouth, and he is called Frank Hester. Now, the Conservative Party have Rishi Sunak has actually described it as racist. Senior politicians across the political spectrum have described it as racist. And what he had said in a 2019 meeting, which The Guardian has obtained, they say, I have no proof that The Guardian has actually obtained this, but they say, he said, looking at Abbott made you want to hate all black women and said the MP should be shot. Now, by the way, my colleague at GB News yesterday, Nana Akua, was arguing that actually it wasn't a racist statement. Besides that, Sunak says it was. Kemi Badenoch said it was. Former Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng said it was. And of course, former Chancellor under Liz Truss. William Hague, former Conservative leader, said it was. And Diane Abbott said the remarks were frightening. And she said that she is a single woman and that makes her vulnerable anyway. But to hear someone talking like this is worrying. She said she'd made a report about the comments to the Metropolitan Police, which is assessing the complaint. I mean, I just think getting the police involved is ridiculous, right? You can argue that the comments are offensive and it has a collectivist attitude to it, which suggests that all black people are the same. But how many times has Diane Abbott actually made statements to suggest perhaps, on white people, for example, derogatory comments on white people? She obviously made derogatory comments on Jewish people, where she said that Jews isn't a race, and therefore, it's not racism, basically. And many Jews, of course, deeply upset by that. I've got that there. She said Jews experience prejudice, not racism. Well, I think if you look at the streets of Britain at the minute, you would argue that it has very strong elements of racism, and the whole idea that all Jews are some collective cabal that control the world. Nothing could be more racist than that, in my opinion. And also the idea that we should all have some form of collective white guilt. That's a very racist idea. Are we going to start banging people up for saying that? But she got in on it today at Prime Minister's questions. She saw an opportunity and she sought to seize it. And she condemned she slammed, says Sky News, the Speaker of the House of Commons for not calling her up to talk on the race row, despite standing up over 40 times. I mean, she could probably do with the exercise, so standing up and down 40 times is probably quite good. But the MP, who's still suspended from the Parliamentary Labour Party, apparently she asked to be put back in today, trying to use this as a way of getting back in. She said, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, she doesn't know whose interest Sir Lindsay Hoyle is serving after she did not speak in a debate about her safety. I just think that's so ridiculous, right? What Frank Hester said, offensive. I've already said that. But is it really a threat to her safety, Chloe? Am I being unkind, uncharitable?
No, I don't think so. I think there are. I think that these comments were unacceptable. I thought that it was very inappropriate language to use. But I think anyone with a brain cell can see that this is someone just making a comment that went too far. This is not someone who genuinely wants to go and hurt and potentially kill Diane Abbott. I don't think this guy is going to turn up at her house with a pitchfork and whatever other weapons. That's just not going to happen. So to go
is it a good use of police time then?
No, of course not. There are actual people being stabbed far too often in London. The Met Police would spend far better off spending their time on that. Now, you brought up the idea that there's this collective white guilt. I think, yes, this guy's comments were inappropriate, but it's only when a white guy says something inappropriate that attention is drawn to it. Yeah, as you said, Diane Abbott has made plenty of inappropriate comments in the past, but, I hate to say it, but she probably gets away with it more than the rest of us because she's black.
Yeah, I think Hector's commented on YouTube, and Hector says Humza Yousaf went on a 10-minute anti-white racist rant, and he was made leader of the Scottish Parliament and the SNP, which is absolutely true, is it not? Because, am I going to call up the Scottish police and retrospectively complain about that and say, he's put my life at risk, I feel unsafe as a white fella? Actually, I think I've got one thing going in my favour, which is that I'm not a straight white male, but I am indeed a white male. And I'm from the northeast of England, so maybe I'm some form of chippy little oik, of the kind that Miss Abbott certainly doesn't like. But I just I find the obsession with all of this, and I want to read out actually what she says, because I found it really quite alarming. She said, so she criticised the speaker after he failed to call her. We know that. It says she stood up 46 times. Good for her. That's better than most aerobics classes, surely. And the row was sparked by these comments, as you know, and she kept bobbing up and down, and the speaker, she seems to suggest the speaker ignored her. Now, in
I mean, it does seem odd that she wasn't allowed to speak.
But to say what? To say this man made offensive comments about me, some Tory donor, is that really good use of parliamentary time? Does that matter to her constituents in Hackney? Do you know what I mean? Is this really a good use of precious parliamentary time to ask the Prime Minister? And in a post on X, and I'll ask for your opinion on this, she says, I don't know whose interests the speaker thinks he's serving, but it's not in the interest of the Commons or democracy. Well, what? How is it in the interest of democracy for Diane Abbott to go on some rant about how awful this Tory donor has been about her and how unsafe she feels? I just find it. I find it absolutely bizarre. I find it far-fetched. I think it's hyperbole of the highest order. And I don't think it has any merit to suggest that there's been an attack, an assault on democracy, because Diane Abbott bobbed up and down 46 times and didn't get to speak.
I think it's a great shame that it feels like in the Commons we don't actually focus anymore on matters of our constituents that need to be discussed. And the reason why it's so important that we crack on and focus on the things that actually matter, housing, education, healthcare, all the problems that our constituents face, is because it's been so long. So since 2016, I don't think we have really made much progress in Parliament, because from 2016, the whole focus in Parliament, every debate it seemed, was let's just get Brexit out the way. Let's deal with getting an agreement sorted with the EU. How long did that take? And then we can go back to helping our constituents with their problems. As soon as we finally got Brexit sorted, then COVID happened. And then all they talked about was COVID and thought, let's just wait until the pandemic is over. Let's wait until we've spent 3 weeks flattening the curve, and then that got extended and extended. And then we'll go back to actually dealing with the problems in this country. Now COVID's over.
Yeah.
And now we're just talking about Gaza and this.
Exactly, and it's the ultimate. If you ask me, it's the ultimate grift, right? Race is used as a tool to grift. I do not think there is any evidence to suggest that Diane Abbott is at serious risk. I think MPs should have security in this day and age. I do, but I'd put that down, Chloe, more to the Islamist threat than I would any threat about against black people or black members of Parliament. And I do think it's a grift, and you can see Zara Sultana behind her in that screenshot there from Sky News, who is another one who does my napper in, and all she ever speaks about is bloody Gaza. Her constituents must be going out of their minds in her email box. But a couple of MPs piped up. Stella Creasy, who's never seen a movement or a slogan that she doesn't want to jump on and get some virtue signalling points from. She's, of course, the woman who wants to breastfeed her baby in the House of Commons. But she said, right now, Diane Abbott is standing to ask a question in Prime Minister's Questions as her safety is debated by others. Something very wrong if her voice isn't heard today. Bearing in mind, by the way, she's an independent MP, so you have to put focus on those who have in blocks. So the SNP would take precedent, the Labour Party would take precedent, then the Lib Dems would take precedent. Obviously, the Conservative Party being the government top tier. And then so the DUP and so on and so forth, before you get to an independent MP. But Rosie Duffield says, extremely uncomfortable to witness. And I agree with Rosie Duffield on some issues, so I'll ask you about this. She says, while others were speaking about her, Diane Abbott was not selected to speak herself. Why? Do you think actually these Labour MPs, Chloe, are suggesting that the Speaker of the House of Commons is racist?
Some of them probably think that. Some of them probably think the Speaker was just being a bit incompetent. Obviously, the Speaker, his position has been under a lot of scrutiny recently because of what happened when he failed to follow convention in that debate over the Gaza ceasefire. So it is kind of fertile ground, somebody to attack.
Yeah.
So I think that, as you say, he's got a priority order. She was last on the list. Some people might say if they were talking about her, she should have had a chance to speak. But we should really have been moving the debate on as quickly as we could back to matters of our constituents. And on the point of her being an independent MP, I'm really confused as to why this comment that's come from the Tory donor means in some people's eyes that now she should be reinstated as a Labour MP. Two wrongs don't make a right.
Which, by the way, she
like...
is reportedly trying to make that case. So Keir Starmer reportedly, I obviously wasn't there, asked her if he can do anything to let him know, and she said, give me the whip back, which is let me back in the Parliamentary Party. And he apparently just fobbed it off. But I mean, do you think that's going to happen? Because, well, actually, I'll read out these first before you answer that, Chloe, just really quickly. Because I said on Twitter, should those in glass houses really play games with stones? And what I meant by that was they just allowed back into the party Andy MacDonald. Now, Guido Fawkes had this and said, Labour MP reference from River to the Sea in a speech, which he did, it was recorded on film, reinstated the party, and a big money Labour donor who thinks Hamas are freedom fighters, they accepted that cash with glee. And Guido says, this is the changed Labour Party, obviously making a bit of a gag on that. And then if we look at this one, Neil Coyle, who was suspended for drunk abuse and making racist comments to a journalist, and who previously had a sexual harassment complaint upheld against him, has now been given the whip back by Labour. That was posted last year, but still the point remains. Why does it only matter when it's Labour and Labour MP that has endured the so-called hate or offence or whatever you want to call it? Why is it that it doesn't ever work the other way, Chloe?
I know. It, as I said, two wrongs don't make a right, and it just seems so strange that there are calls to let her back in the party. I know you said Keir Starmer didn't initially seem so keen, but from what I was reading in the news earlier, it seemed like everyone was behind her, saying she needs to be reinstated because of this mean comment about her. That makes no sense whatsoever. You've just shown this story about Andy MacDonald being let back in the party despite him having problems with anti-Semitism. Diane Abbott was suspended because of supposedly anti-Semitic comments. If he lets these people back in the party, he's not exactly able to say that they're a changed Labour Party. He's had so much trouble with the Rochdale election and everything that went on with Azhar Ali.
Disgraceful.
That really showed to people maybe the Labour Party hasn't changed and they still have an anti-Semitism problem. He's now got even more to do to prove that his Labour Party has changed. He's not exactly going to do himself any favours if he lets Andy MacDonald and Diane Abbott back in the party, is he?
Well, the article where Guido reported this, you can hear that.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying, is a terrorist attack from Hamas Palestine defending itself?
I think one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist, right? That's how it works.
So that is not the Labour position, interestingly. They're not saying that. They're saying the opposite of that.
Yeah, I understand.
But you're happy to... This is pragmatism.
But this is my view.
This is your view.
This is how I feel.
So that's a Labour donor there saying that Hamas, which are a prescribed terrorist organisation in this country, as you well know, Chloe, are freedom fighters and not terrorists. Now, the Labour Party have obviously spent an entire week now saying that the Tories should pay back this 10 million quid from this bloke who said some nasty words about Diane Abbott, and give it all back. Now, I would argue that this is saying something incredibly, well, I find it repulsive, to be honest, and repugnant. But Dale Vince, who's, by the way, made a complete packet out of selling renewable energy, which is the biggest bloody fiddle I know, and don't get us started on that, Chloe, because as you know, I'll go on for more than half an hour. But he's been launching an initiative calling for the youth of Britain to vote Labour. So he's very much in with the Labour donor class. And if Labour, Guido say, if Labour thinks donors' cash donations should be returned when they say extreme things, what do they make of Vince's views? So that's a good point, isn't it? And that is a double standard as far as the donor charge is concerned.
Absolutely. The Labour Party is in no place to tell the Tories to hand back their 10 million quid if they're not going to hand back whatever donations they've had from this guy. Now, what's interesting is I Googled this story earlier. I looked up, tried to find the video elsewhere on YouTube. The only place I could find it was on Guido. I have not seen this in the press anywhere else.
No,
Meanwhile, the Tory donor story is everywhere.
Yeah.
Why is it only Tory sleaze that makes the news, it seems?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a complete double standard in the media, isn't it, right? It's just complete silence when a Labour person says something like that about a terrorist organisation in this country. But, you call Diane Abbott something that's admittedly a bit mean or whatever else, and suddenly it's everywhere, right? It's you can't move for it. We're not talking about issues that actually are important to people. We're instead talking about a person that I think is one of the most divisive, ignorant, awful politicians to ever be elected to the House of Commons. People keep saying, oh, she was the first black woman to be elected to Parliament. I couldn't give a flying fig, right? That doesn't make her the best thing since sliced bread. She is a horrible person. And by the way, I've met her, I've debated her, and she was absolutely awful to me. And I was only a kid at the time. I'll tell you this, actually, because viewers will be interested in this. But I did the BBC back when the BBC used to have me on. I'm far too Brexity and opinionated now. But the BBC had me on Any Questions, which is sort of like a Radio 4 panel show. And it was in Birmingham. And I got into a car that the BBC had paid for, and Diane Abbott was there. And she was in the car. She sat in the front seat and I was sat behind. And I got out the car and she hadn't spoken to me the entire time. She sat tapping away on her phone. And I said to her, Diane, it's an absolute pleasure to meet you. Congratulations on all you've achieved in politics. And she just looked at me and she said, I know who you are. And then walked off. And that was the last thing she ever said to me outside of that.
How
apart
rude.
From the debate. Yeah, she was so rude, so dismissive. And I was, as I say, I must have been, 21, 22 at the time. But, and I was shitting myself, by the way, if I'm allowed to say that on this stream, because it was the biggest thing I'd ever done at that time. And she was very incredibly rude and all the rest of it. Have you got what it takes to be a reasoned presenter? Well, send us a short clip of yourself to join@reasoned.uk and we might be seeing you on this very channel very soon indeed.